Very good. Welcome, guys. Welcome to the Intellectual Property and Trade Nexus podcast. Wherever you are following us from, welcome. Good evening, good afternoon, good day, good morning, wherever you are following from. Thanks for having you. We are going to have another episode, our third episode today. Welcome. Thanks for following us. Just give us a minute and then we will proceed. We will start into our discussion. Thank you for joining us. Just give our minute or two before we start. I love you better, girl, I love you better. I love you better, I can love you better. Yes. La, 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 la. Okay, let's begin. Let's begin the zone vibe 125. Okay, zone vibe 125. Reset. Okay. So welcome, 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 welcome to all. Welcome to the Intellectual Property and Tree Nexus podcast. We are glad to have you all here. Today we will be discussing market failure and patentability requirements. So what are the requirements, the stipulated requirements an invention need to meet in order to be considered patentable. So patentability requirements. So the existing criteria that is in place for inventions to be considered patentable. We'll be looking at that briefly. But before that, we will be discussing market failure from the trade and economic perspective, and from the intellectual property perspective. What is market failure? So I think just gonna minute. I think we can take a break or two instead of just moving on. Let's take some music before we begin, at least. Okay, let's just deal with the issues quick. Let's just deal with the issue quick. I always have an issue with my background. I never satisfy with my background. Always have an issue. But anyway, we will adjust social media and podcast life. So It's a new experience, a new beginning. So with time, things will improve and we will adjust to this new experience. But very interesting and intriguing experience that we can have the possibility to, come on social media, particularly Facebook, to share our ideas, our experiences from a professional perspective, working with international trade regulations, WTO, working closely, receiving a lot of technical trainings from the WRPO, which is the World Intellectual Property Organization, uh, and working directly with intellectual property issues from the domestic perspective, working with the Ministry of Commerce and Industry, working closely with the Liberia Intellectual Property Office and all related land ministries and institutions, Ministry of Justice, the courts, the business code, and all those dealing and contributing to IP protection, IP development, and IP promotion. So we are glad to have the opportunity to come here to express our views, our expertise, our experience, and really be able to relate with you guys on different issues relating to intellectual property, relating to international trade, relating to innovations, creativity. And so it's a huge opportunity to have this platform. And we just want to appreciate your support, all those that have been following our our live stream, and after the live stream, the video that's still on our Facebook page, also on YouTube. And we would like to add additional platform, maybe LinkedIn. Maybe we'll be uploading on LinkedIn. We have uploaded on YouTube also. But we thank you, we appreciate you for your support, for taking out your time from your busy schedules to just maybe give that 10, 20, 30 minutes or to go through the full podcast to understand the length and breadth of the issues being discussed from the starting to the very end. So thank you for your support. Thank you for always following. We ask you to continue to like, to share, to comment, make your observation on our output, because this is a new trend. We might have some challenges, difficulties coming through. What other subject matters would you like for us to discuss? What could be your perspective? What inquiries you have? What comments you have? Please do make comments. Please make inquiries. Please. Also, we are open for critique. You can make a critical comment on us in terms of delivery, in terms of the video output, the audio output, and all issues related to the general output of this podcast. So we are looking forward to your comments. We are soliciting your comments and your views. So thank you. So not to spend a lot of time, we just move straight into the issues, the topic of the day, market failure. And from there, we move to patentability requirements. So market failure, what is market failure? When we speak about market failure, what comes to mind when we talk about market failure? So we'll be discussing market failure from two perspectives. Firstly, from the trade and economic perspective, then we move to the IP and economic perspective. So we are discussing market failure from the background of trade and intellectual property perspectives. So market failure from a trade perspective is a situation wherein there is an inefficient distribution of goods and services in a free market, underscore free market. So if in a given free market, there are indicators and attributes of insufficient or inefficient distribution of goods and services that will result into what we call market failure. So in a given free market, the supply of goods and services are not efficiently distributed across sectors. Uh, uh, Consumers and end users are not getting their goods, their services, because the supply chain is not effective enough to distribute the goods and services that is required for consumers and end users. So that in that situation, in a free market system, we refer to that as market failure. So market failure is the inefficient distribution of goods and services in a given free market. And the reason I would like to underscore free market in this is that all markets are not free market, but in our current trade dispensation, most markets, in general, most markets are free markets, are operating on a free market system, because generally all members of the World Trade Organizations, the World Trade Organization members are subscribed to the free market system. So in a free market system, supply and demand dictate the price flow. The flow of pricing in general is dictated by the supply and demand of goods and services in that given free market. So in general, all WTO members are or do subscribe to the free market system, because WTO rules provide that the market should be free. It should operate in a free market system, and there should be no governmental intervention to control price in a given free market system. So that's what I underscore free market. So market failure from the trade and economic perspective is the inefficient distribution of goods and services in a given free market system. So, what could be the causes of market failure? Market failure. There are several causes, but we will discuss a few for the purpose of this podcast. So, there are negative externalities that might lead to market failure, and we'll just be looking at three of those negative externalities from an economic and trade perspective. So one could be price mechanism. So price mechanism simply means where the government has an intervention, where the government is intervening into the market system, and the government have a way of price control, of controlling the price, the general price of the market. So most of the institutions providing goods and services, factories, business houses, uh, uh, they are state-owned institutions. They are SOE, state-owned institutions. So most of the institutions and entities within that given country are run and operated by the government. So the government then make a determination on what price could be for electricity, what price could be for gasoline, what price could be for just essential commodities that a society or a nation needs to run and operate successfully. So the government determine the price flow or the price control in that given market. So price mechanism generally speak to price control. If the government have an or an intervention that administers the day-to-day pricing of essential commodity on that market. That could be one of the negative externalities of or causes of market failure. And then we also say market control because obviously market control and price control work in hand because market happens to be where trade or the exchange of services everywhere they take place. It could also be abstract in a sense and in another sense physical. So market control, if the government, like I said, the government operate all the entities and institutions that render services to the general public or that provide goods to the general public. So the government control the price on the market, the government control the market itself. And how it does that is through legislation. So the use of legislation could be or a form of negative externalities because use of legislation in that sense, that means the government legislate prices. The government legislate how the markets in totality operate between consumers and the entities run by government, how they interact with each other. So these are some of the causes of market failure. Market failure, one one the causes one cause one one cause of market failure is price mechanism, which happens to be also a governmental intervention in controlling price. The second cause that we speak about is market control, and the third cause could be use of legislation. There are other causes, but I would like to focus on these three causes. And the use of legislation is basically the government instituting laws and policy to control pricing and to control how the market operates in that given country. So these are these are issues that might lead to market failure. But in our free market system, where There's no governmental intervention in price control, in market control. So then the suppliers and the consumers, happens to be the end user, they transact in a free flow. So that transaction between the consumers and the suppliers will will make a determination on the price flow within a given free market. So in the free market, the government have limited, or I can say not no control, because the government might have certain level, certain degree of intervention on the market. The government cannot absolutely just sit aside. So in a free market system, the government has limited control over pricing and how consumers and the suppliers in the market operate. Supply and de- Supply and demand dictates the price flow of how the free market operates. What the government does in a free market system is monitor. So the government monitors the prices on the international market. If the goods is coming from the international market, they monitor the prices on the international market, the suppliers, what the cost they made to bring the goods on the local market nationally, and the profit margin. So they ensure that the supplier doesn't exploit through profiteering. So the government has in place a price marker. The, with the price marker on each and every product or services, then the government can monitor the suppliers on a given free market, that they do not exploit the consumers within that free market. So the government serves as, or the government, what the government does is monitor the relationship between the consumers and the suppliers and ensure that the consumer gets their money worth out of the products they buy, and that the suppliers get the required profit that they need to get on sell goods and services that they import in a given local market. So that's how the government operates. The government doesn't control pricing. It doesn't control the market. It doesn't use legislations to control pricing and control the market. Government leave it to the consumers and the suppliers, and based on supply and demand, the prices within that given market is determined. And what the government does is monitor to ensure that there's no profiteering and that consumers get their money worth out of the goods and services they pay for, and that the suppliers get the required profit, that the profit margin that they are required to get from a given product or service in that free market system. So basically, that is the trade and economic perspective from what we refer to as market failure. Market failure is the inefficient distribution of goods and services in a free market system. And some of the causes could be, like we said, price mechanism, which is also price control and market control through the use of legislation. So government directly intervening into detecting the price in a given market and detecting how the market operates. So that is the trade and economic perspective. Now we move to the IP and economic perspective. So IP and economic perspective, we will say that in the absence of patent law, there will be inadequate incentive to innovate and inadequate incentive to pay for innovation. So in the absence of patent law, in the absence of patent protection, there will be inadequate incentive to innovate and inadequate incentive to pay for innovation. What that means is, in the absence of patent protection, there is a logical decision, there's a rational decision not to invest on the front end, invest your time, your resources, years of productivity to come up to produce or to make or manufacture a device, a drug, or make something that society needs. Because with all patent law, all you need to do is to wait when someone invests their time, their resources, and their effort in producing a device or a drug that society needs. You wait when that production is done and the information is available. Whatever way you can obtain that information, you obtain that information and produce either the same drug, something much advanced, or something a little productive than what you obtain from the original producer of that drug, that device, or that invention. So in the absence of patent law, in the absence of patent protection, there's inadequate incentive to innovate, there's inadequate incentive to pay for innovations. So logically or rationally, you have no incentive to make all the investment and come up with an innovation, but you rather wait someone make that innovation, you copy it, and you copy that innovation, and you can use that innovation to produce something much advanced, something similar, and you yourself now can sell it on the market because there's no patent law to hold you liable or to penalize you for damages for infringing on someone's existing patent. So in the absence of patent law, the lack of incentive to innovate and the lack of incentive to pay for innovation is what then in the innovative space could be referred to as market failure. So instead of making all the front-end investment of time and resources to technical feed to invent, maybe let's say I wanted to invent a flying car, a flying vehicle that I can get in my vehicle early in the morning and fly from my home to my workplace and just land, maybe within 10 to 20 minutes. So I want to make all this investment, front-end investment, lot of time, lot of resources, millions and billions of dollars, and I invented a flying car. So without patent law, others within the same invention space could just not we could just make a logical or rational decision to wait for me to manufacture my flying car and just copy the technical information and make their own flying car just wait after the outcome of whatsoever invention have been previously made, and you just piggyback on the existing invention with less time, with less resources invested, and you come out with the same product, or you come out with something much advanced. So that in that case, it will be in the absence of patent protection. So in the absence of patent protection, there will be no need to innovate, and people will not be incentivized to innovate. So no one will be making new inventions or new phones or new vehicles. There will be no Tesla, there will be no iPhone, there will be no Samsung, and all these new products, investing in artificial intelligence, investing in biotechnology, nanotechnology, investing in all these new inventions. In the absence of patent law, there will be no need to make all these investment, and the market will fail. Innovation wise, intellectual property wise, the market will fail because people will not be incentivized to produce new innovations, new drugs, new medicines, new chemicals, new devices, new phones, new laptops, and all the technical gadgets that we have, that we are privileged to have. If we have the financial resources to purchase, will not have them. Market, the innovation market will fail. So, in the context of IP and economic perspective, the market will essentially fail in the absence of patent law and patent protection. And we will have no option to prevent free riding and copying. All people will do will just copy, 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 and copy, and there will be no incentive to innovate. There will be no incentive to pay for innovations, and people will not be, inventors will not be motivated to invent. So that is the market failure from the perspective of IP and economics. So we will end on that. That is what I wanted to share with you on market failure from the trade and economic perspective, and that of the IP and economic perspective. Now we will move quickly to patentability requirements. When we talk about patentability requirements, what does that entail? What does patentability requirement entail from the IP, from the innovation world? When we are in the space of inventions, innovations, and we have a great an ingenious idea that we want to share with the world. We want to produce an embodiment of that idea through products, through service. What are the existing requirements in place for our invention to meet in order to pass in order to get the stamp, the approval stamp that this invention pass all the requirements that is set, and so we are granting patent right to this invention because it meets the existing patentability requirements. So what are the requirements that are involved, that is involved in having a patent? So there are two categories of patentability requirements. There are two categories. The first category has to do with the requirement for patent application. So there's a requirement the patent application has to meet, and there's a set of requirements that the innovation has to meet. There are two categories of patentability requirements. The first category are sets of requirements the patent application has to meet. And the second category are sets of requirements the invention must meet in order to get a patent right. So the patent application has to include, firstly, a detailed description of the invention. That's the first requirement, the description of the patent application. I have a brilliant idea on how to invent a flying car, a flying vehicle. There are two requirements I must meet in order to get patent right and patent protection. I must meet the requirement on the patent application, and I must meet the requirement on the invention. So these are set of requirements. One set of requirement is for the patent application, and the second set of requirements are for the invention. So the patent application must have a detailed description of the invention. The patent, the quality of the description has to be enabling enough that someone in the technical field can make and use that information to make flying car or flying vehicle. So the patent application should include a description of the invention, and the description should be what? Enabling enough that someone in that technical field of making flying vehicle can use that description that is given to also make a flying vehicle. It has to enable that information that you are providing in the patent application has to enable someone in that technical field to use that information to make that invention. So the scope of the patent right has to be very, very clear. You need to invest a lot of time to give a detailed description, a painstaking detailed description of the invention. And so the patent application in general has to provide a detailed information clear and full description of the invention. So we are still on the application. The description of the invention need to be painstakingly detailed, clear, and precise. That someone within that technical field, in this case, flying vehicle, can use that detailed information to make flying vehicle. So that's how detailed the information in the patent application needs to be in order to be granted patent right from the application side of the patentability requirements. So, like we said, in general, the patent, in general, the patent application has to provide what? Detailed, full description of the invention. Then we move to the invention side. We were discussing the application side, the steps of requirements that is required for the application to meet. Now we are moving to the invention side to discuss the steps of requirement that the invention must meet in order to be granted patent right. So on the patent side, it is one thing to describe an invention in painstaking detail. You can give all the steps, the description, the specific procedures, and everything that is required. You can give all that. But if all that description that is given is only given to reinvent the wheel of an existing patent, then you are not going to be granted patent. So if you meet the first requirement, the first category of the patentability requirement has to do with the description of the patent application. And when you met everything, you give the detailed description that anyone that is skilled in the art will reach to that. Anyone in that technical field can read that information and make a flying vehicle. You met all the requirements for the description of the application. But if you did meet all the requirements for the application in terms of the detailed description, but all this description that you made available was describing an existing pattern or trying to reinvent the wheel of an existing pattern, you will not be granted patent right. So you have to balance it. You have to balance the patent application description, and you have to balance the invention application description. So there are two sides. You need to balance the description of the application and as well as the description of the invention. So you cannot balance, you can meet the first requirement and fail to meet the second requirement. The both requirements must be met in order to be granted patent right. Then we move to the second part, the second category that has to do with the description of the invention, which is very key. You submit your patent application and you have given a detailed description of what the invention is, what is endorsed, what it does, what is the purpose, the usage of it, and it's very detailed. And it is enabling enough that someone skilled in that technical field of flying vehicle or can basically use that detailed and painstaking description to make a new flying vehicle. So in addition to the patent application being high quality, the invention has to be high quality. So you have to balance the two sides. Description of the application and the invention. So there are three areas where an invention is measured for its quality and inventive technological merit. So we finished with the description. Now we are moving to the invention. And the invention side of the patentability requirement says the focus is on three areas. There are three areas that are used to make a determination as to whether an invention meets the quality and inventive technological merit. So let's move into these three areas and see what they are. What are these areas that we use to measure inventive technological merit? So an invention has to be useful. An invention must have utility. Utility is the key word. No matter how sophisticated, no matter how attractive, no matter how good looking an invention may be, lack the lack of utility or usage the lack of utility or usage is or no it makes an invention non-essential. What is an invention if I can use it, if it can serve any utilitarian purpose? So there should be the first requirement an invention must meet is to have utility. An invention must be useful. So that is the first requirement an invention must meet. It has to have utility or industrial applicability. It has to have utility or industrial applicability. That's the word that will give me a challenge. So an invention have to have utility or industrial applicability. Every invention must have certain level of utility attached to it. There should be a given reason, a given purpose that invention must meet. It should have utility in a sense that that utility might serve as a need. Why should I have a phone? Why should I have television? Why should I have a vehicle? Why should I have a flying vehicle? So an invention must have a utilitarian purpose to it. It should have a usage. And this is a very low bar and a very low requirement in the inventive space among inventors, innovators, and creators, this is a very low bar. Every inventor knows fully well the first requirement his or her invention should meet, it should have, or it should be useful. It should be useful to a given sector of the public or the public in general. So that is a minimum or very low bar. The amount of utility doesn't have to be exceptional. It doesn't have to be a brand new field that this inventor, this invention is not a very new field that is being created by this invention. It could just be an advancement of an existing invention or an invention that falling into the place of the public domain, and this inventor had access to that information, but rather improve on that information. So it doesn't matter how exceptional an invention is. It doesn't have to meet a high benchmark of being exceptional uh, in terms of efficiency, or it doesn't have to be highly costly or less costly. It doesn't matter. What matters is that the purpose, the usage, and the purpose of that invention should be met. If you give a detailed description that a flying vehicle can fly you from your house or from wheresoever you are to your respective destination in 1 hour, 10 minutes, in 10 minutes. So if you give a very detailed description that a flying vehicle can do X, Y, and Z, that description should also be what exactly that flying vehicle can do. So an invention must do what it says it was meant or made to do. So that is the requirement. So an invention doesn't need to be exceptional. It doesn't need to be an F breaking invention. It doesn't need to be a new and exceptional field. You don't need to have all the money spent to discover the invention, or less money, whether high or low money. It doesn't matter. What matter is it must work and accomplish what it says it will do. If it's a mobile, it's a smartphone, it must do what smartphone is capable of doing. If it says a flying vehicle, it must do what flying vehicle does. So it must meet its given purpose. It must work and accomplish what it says is out to do. That's the requirement an invention must meet. But that's the first requirement. An invention has to be useful. An invention must have a utilitarian purpose to it. It has to have utility and industrial applicability. That is the first requirement an invention must meet. So, where in the cases, there are certain cases where you won't find utility or industrial applicability. For example, when let's say you discover a new chemical. You are in your lab, you are doing some mixture and exchange of different compounds, different chemicals, nitrogen, hydrogen, and all these sort of uh, chemicals you have in your lab. You are experimenting, trying to discover a new chemical. But this new chemical, after all the mixture you came up with, a very new chemical, it has no name, it was something astonishing to you. Say, I've discovered a new chemical. However, you couldn't identify the usage or what this new chemical could possibly or potentially address. Through your experimentation, you discover a new chemical in your lab, but there's no purpose, there's no usage or utility to this new discovery. So in that case, you will not be granted patent because in the first place, your invention or your new chemical lack usage. It's not useful. If you cannot establish what a chemical, what an invention can do, what purpose it serves, then it cannot be patented. It cannot be given patent right, and it cannot be covered under patent protection. So that is it. You are unable to identify what your chemical, the purpose of it, what it does. It doesn't serve a specific utilitarian purpose. So there's no utilitarian purpose to this chemical. It's just something new. New is not enough. New is not, discovering something new is not enough. So you can have the best chance at coming up with a lot of new stuff as long as there's no utilitarian purpose to whatsoever new invention. It will not even be classified as invention in our case because it doesn't meet the requirement. So long there's no purpose to it, it doesn't meet the requirement to be granted a patent right. So most time in biotechnology and genetic, these cases come out where a new invention, in this case for biotechnology and genetic, a new gene. There was a case specifically in the US where identifying a gene may have been very useful, because you want to know what type of gene it is, and you want to know the full sequence of this gene. So it's a good thing to identify a specific gene within the genome of an individual or whosoever that person may be, but you want to identify a specific gene. It's a good thing to identify it. We appreciate that. We like that as a society. But without identifying what that gene does, whether it maybe it can increase your muscle density, maybe by having this gene, by having more of this gene in your body, it can increase your muscle density. Maybe it could make you taller. It could make you smarter. Maybe your IQ could be higher because of this specific gene that has been identified by researchers. So if there's no purpose to this specific gene that you as a researcher have identified within the body, then it cannot be granted patent protection. So whatsoever new thing, new or maybe chemical, gene, whatsoever new that you can discover cannot be automatically granted patent protection because there are other requirements that it must meet in order to be granted said right. So it must have a utilitarian purpose. It can be you, but when there's no utilitarian purpose to it, then it doesn't pass the first requirement. So, like I was saying, if researchers didn't know the inventive process that can help identify and locate a gene, then whatsoever gene you discover in the body and not knowing what the function or the purpose is served, then it's not useful. It's not useful. You need to do more work. By identifying a new gene is not enough. You need to do more work. So you can expand on your research, but you will not be granted patent in this case. So when there's a lot of unpredictability in a given technical field, utility can somehow be difficult to identify because you cannot predict the purpose or the outcome of what that new thing might lead to, what function, what purpose it must serve. So that is the issue. So after discussing the first purpose in terms of the first requirement from the invention perspective that has to do with usefulness, the first requirement is usefulness. An invention must first meet that benchmark of being useful. It must have a utilitarian purpose. So, what is the second requirement that an invention needs to meet? The second requirement is what we call novelty. Novelty means something new. So, novelty. So, and it might be interesting how I set this up to say usage before novelty, because in some instances novelty comes before usage. But I did the presentation to prove that utility in most instances, the first purpose should have an invention or the first requirement an invention should meet in the context of patentability requirement, having discussed the patent application side in terms of the invention application, all invention should meet the usefulness requirement, having or utilitarian purpose to it. So novelty, second requirement. So novelty is the second area that we are going to look at after an invention passes the utilitarian purpose. So novelty means something new, something new. So you cannot patent something that is already in existence. So if there are existing patents that are very active, they are being protected under the law, you cannot patent them. You cannot go to uh, patent an existing patent that falls on Samsung or falls on Apple. There's no way you can do that. So you must come up with something new, something new. Even if there was an existing patent, but it later expired and fall into the public domain, if you want to use that information to produce new product, there should be a level of advancement. You cannot produce the identical product. You have to improve on the utility purpose within that product. So when you improve on it, then you can get patent protection. So there's a certain level of advancement or improvement, even if the patent is not totally new, you can still be granted patent protection. But the focus that we are discussing here now is placed on novelty, which means something new. So, like I said, you cannot patent something that is already in existence in the patent space, but I made mention of patents that have fallen into the public domain. But if you can advance on the technology or on the existing patent, then you can be granted patent protection. So there's an exception to the rule in this case. So, however, being new is not enough. So, like I stated, having something new is not enough to be granted patent protection. Novelty is not the full and sole requirement for patent protection. So you can anybody can come out and develop something new, something trivial, but it's new. Something insubstantial, but it's new. Something non-essential, but it's new. So just because something is new, it doesn't mean that thing worth patent protection. So that is what we need to understand. You can be useful, you can be new, but being new alone is not sufficient enough. Being new doesn't automatically give you patent protection. So, but something that will be novel and not obvious, something that will have an inventive step. So it can be new, you can have a new product, you can have a new device, but it should not be something that is obvious that we all are aware of. And more to that, it should have an inventive step attached to it. So just going back on the patentability requirement, we discussed there are two approaches to the patentability requirement. There are set requirements for the patent application, that it should be descriptive enough and it is worth giving all your effort in painstakingly describing your patent in the patent application, that someone in that given technical field can read your patent application and or patent description and produce whatsoever product that you intend to manufacture or produce, whatsoever invention that you intend to manufacture or produce. And secondly, that invention must have usefulness to it. It should have a utilitarian purpose. That's the second. Then from the invention perspective, there are three areas. From the invention side of the requirements, there are three areas. The first area, the invention should be useful. The second area, the invention should have, it should be new and non-obvious and have inventive step. So it should be useful, it should be new, it should not be obvious to the general public or us, and it should have inventive steps. Then we move into the third requirement, which happens to be the last requirement that we want to discuss before concluding. Oh, take a lot of time. Well, it's good to delve into the issue. So the third requirement happens to be is inventive steps requirement that we just spoke of. So inventive step requirement, what it entails is, so when we talk about invention, what do we mean by invention? How significant should be the advancement or improvement to an existing pattern or an existing invention in order for it to be worth granted a patent? So there's an existing invention, and it fell into the public domain that everyone have access to, and you as an inventor, you took that information that is into the public and you made an advancement on it. So the question is, how significant should be that advancement that is needed to be made in order for an invention to receive a patent? How significant should be that? How significant should that improvement or advancement be? So that is the question we are asking. So both for the application and invention requirement, you must meet in order to consider for the patent. So what we are saying here is that if there was an existing invention and it fell into the public domain, and you took that information and made an advancement on it, when you are applying for patent protection at whatever given territory, nation or country or region, in your patent application, your patent description should be also detailed and specific enough that someone in that technical field should understand through reading the patent application and the description that based on the information you provided, someone in that technical field can read that information and produce the same technology you intend to produce. So the technology should, the application should meet the description requirement, and it should meet the invention requirement. So in order to be granted a patent right or patent protection, in order to be certified as a legal patent holder to a specific invention, you must meet the application requirement and the invention requirements. So this is basically what it's saying. It must be able to describe the application in painstaking detail and also be able to provide detailed information on how the invention can be used by the general public, how they can make and use that information, that invention. So you must describe your invention in a painstaking detail that the general public can be able to understand how to make that invention by means of someone with technical knowledge in that field. That person should not be an expert or whatsoever, but should have technical knowledge to read your patent description and make whatsoever invention you intend to make. So enablement is one of the requirements that should be met. The patent should be descriptive enough that someone within that given technical field can understand the description of the patent and be able to make sell product or sell device or equipment for the use of the general public. So enablement is one of the most significant hurdle for patent drafting. So what that means is that most of the companies or inventors or those involved in the patent space that normally apply for patent protection, one of the many difficulties they face, but key among them is enablement. Enablement simply means to make the description of the patent application so detailed and simplified enough that someone within that field that is not an expert or specialist, but someone who works in that field can understand. So that's a hurdle. So that means it have to really be detailed and simple enough for someone in our field to understand it and also make that product. So that is a challenge most innovators face. So as stipulated in the TRIPS agreement, the trade-related aspect of intellectual property rights, the agreement that talk about intellectual property protection specifically in trade issues. So this agreement clearly stipulated that as minimum standards for all derivative members, a patent shall disclose the invention in a manner sufficiently clear and complete for the invention to be carried out by a person skilled in the art. A person skilled in the art. So the TRIPS agreement provides that in order for an invention to meet the patentability requirement on the side of an invention, it should be detailed and descriptive enough that someone within a given technical field who is described as the person skilled in the art should be able to read that description and be able to produce that product. So a person skilled in the art is referred to as what we call in the legal perspective, from the legal term and legal perspective is phosita. 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 So someone skilled in the art from intellectual property or patent protection perspective is the phosita. So is a legal term. The phosita, someone skilled in the art is the phosita, is a person skilled in the art in a typical. It's a typical average person within a given technical field, and he or she is not an expert, is not a specialist, but works within that field. So that person is considered average individual, but works in that field is the phosita. That is the person that must be able to use an invention. So the phosita The FOSITA, according to the TRIPS agreement, is someone skilled in the art, and that person that is skilled in the art should be the person that will read your patent description and be able to produce whatsoever product you describe within that patent application. For example, a patent on a new cancer drug must be written so someone who ordinarily works in chemistry, who ordinarily works in and understands chemistry and cancer treatment and biotechnology will be able to understand and make that invention. So that is the purpose. The purpose is to be able to describe the patent application in a way that someone, this individual who happens to be the FOSITA, an average person in that field, can read the patent application and be able to produce the product. So our FOSITA is a legal fiction found in many patent laws. So FOSITAs or FOSITA, the person skilled in the art, is a fiction, a legal fiction found in many patent laws globally. And patents are supposed to be written for an audience of FOSITA. So those are the people you write your patent laws, your patent application should serve. The patent laws, the patent applications are supposed to be written for an audience of FOSITA, because when you apply for patent right, the FOSITAs, a group of FOSITAs should be the individuals skilled in the art that can read your patent application, and if they are able to produce whatsoever device you are applying for patent protection, then your patent passes the inventive steps requirement, which happens to be the third requirement. So they can read and understand the patent document. If the FOSITAs have sufficient understanding of the innovation, then it effectively puts the invention in possession of the public, because not everyone in the public might be working in this given field, whether in biochemistry or in artificial intelligence, but the FOSITA serves as representatives of the general public within specific uh, technical field that patent applications are being filed for. So if the FOSITAs have sufficient understanding of the invention, and then it effectively place the invention into the possession of the general public when ensure that invention expires and falls into the public domain. So how do we know if a patent description is sufficient enough? How do we know? How can we make a determination that this advancement or this improvement is sufficient enough for this invention to be granted patent protection? How sufficient, how detailed? Generally, we need to identify whether it requires undue experimentation. Undue experimentation. Undue experimentation meaning if how many times do we need to experiment on it in trying it, if it works, or how to use it rightfully. So if you produce a device and you give a description of this device, and the person skilled in the art who happens to be the forcita, an average person in a given technical field, can use your patent description and maybe apply it one or two, three times. Can he apply 5 to 10 times, or maybe for 1 month to 2 years? How long can the experimentation be done? The trial and error to ensure if the device or the invention works rightfully. So the determination on how how do we know if a patent description is sufficient is based on the experimentation, how many times is required to experiment and make sure that the use the usage of that device is rightfully done. Does it require 1 or 2 times? Does it require 5 or 10 trials? Does it require 20 to 30 trials? Does it require a whole month up to 2 years to try? And finally, maybe in the second year before you can rightfully use it. So the longer you can experiment with say innovation, the difficult it is to be granted patent protection. The lesser time, if you can take 10 to 15 trials to get it right, then it's much easier for the public then to have access to it through the FOSITA. But you have to take 1 month to 1 year, 2 years, then it will be difficult for the FOSITAs to be able to read the description and make a new device, a new drug, or whatsoever invention you are applying for patent protection. The FOSITA will take, if the FOSITA are able to take a lesser time in trial or experimentation to rightfully use your device, then you stand a better chance of getting patent protection. If the FOSITAs will require a longer period of trials and experimentation, then it's highly unlikely that you will get patent protection in this direction. So these considerations are made within the US because these are the key movers and shakers, the US and Europe. The IP5 fall within US, EU, and Asia, China, Japan, Korea. So these are the countries that are the movers and shakers, and most of the members of the IP5. So these considerations in terms of how many times you need to experiment on an invention in order to have to rightfully use that invention is also on consideration. So just to recap on the patentability requirement. First, we discussed market failure from the trade and economic perspective. Then we went into the IP and economic perspective, what are the causes of market failure. Then we moved to patentability requirements. We talked about the two categories, the requirements that the application should meet and the requirements the invention should meet. And from the patent application side, we said we need a painstaking detailed description of the application that someone within our technical field can read the description and produce the invention you are filing for patent application from. From the invention side, there are 3 areas we need to focus on. The first area is the usage. Is the invention useful? Does it have a utilitarian purpose? Two, is the invention new? Is it new? Is it non-obvious? Does it have an inventive step? And three, we discuss the inventive step requirement. What are the steps that is required for inventive steps that an invention should meet? So this is how I would like to close this podcast. Thank you for your support and thank you for always following. We would briefly like to uh, do a follow up on the feedback and see if we left some comments. See if we can look at feedbacks. But while we're doing this, let me play you guys some music. I'm gonna say I need to be on this for a while. Thank you for sharing. Oh, thank you. Thanks for the comment. Okay, I think we now bring this podcast to a close. Thank you for your support. Thank you for always following. We now bring this podcast to a close. Thank you for following. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for your comment. We look forward to more comments, questions, inquiries so that we can address them. Uh, Eventually, we'll have some changes made. We'll have to be looking at current events in the IP world and the trade world from the WTO and WIPO perspective. And we'll be looking at current events in the technology world. What's happening? What are the new innovations? What are the new innovations that is being produced from the technology world? So we'll be looking at recent events, recent trends in innovation, and from the trade and IP perspective, we'll be looking at recent current events in IP and trade from the WTO and from the WRPO perspective. So we'll add that to improve the quality of the podcast, and we will include some visuals. But as we go by, as we go along, we'll have additional inputs. We'll have panelists. We'll have guest speakers, and all this joining us. But it takes time. It takes time to. The network is already created. We just need to invite some of our colleagues working in IP and in trade to join us eventually. But we have to make our own effort, do our own work here. Maybe 1 or 2 months from now, then we have other joining up. And if we are opportune to have guests, eventually anyone that that is interested in joining to share their perspective, their experience, or they have questions and queries, and we can make our input on that. So thank you for joining. Follow us again. Continue to share, support, like, and comment. Thank you, guys. Thank you. We appreciate it. Bye.